Has David Cameron talked himself into a corner? His outspoken stance against making federalist Jean-Claude Juncker the next European Commission president could, according to one New York Times editorial, push the UK down a one-way path out of Europe. With a solid core of centre-right and centre-left leaders now backing Luxembourg's Juncker, Eurosceptics will have an easy time of it, blasting another case of Brussels collusion overriding the will of the people. We'll ask our panel to weigh in and examine the stakes of an EU summit that's convened in the Belgian city of Ypres, Belgium, martyred by the fighting of 1 century ago in World War I. A summit that follows the unprecedented inroads of Europe bashers of various stripes in recent EU Parliament elections. As we shall see, there are already surprises in the way they're lining up for battle formation. Today in the France 24 debate, it's Cameron v. Brussels. And with us to talk about it from London, British Conservative member of the European Parliament, Sajjad Karim. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
Also with us here in our studios, we welcome back French Socialist Member of Parliament, Matthias Fekl. Nice to see you. Edouard Tétrault, Director of the Paris Bureau, or would you say branch? What is the correct?
Bureau will be fine with me.
Bureau of the European Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you for joining us. And Antonio Di Bella, Paris correspondent for Italian state broadcaster Rai TV. Thank you for being with us. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. Now, the outcome of who gets what chair at the Commission won't be public until Friday, but barring a major surprise, and despite objections, Brussels insider Jean-Claude Juncker, he was the longtime chair of the Eurogroup when he was Prime Minister of Luxembourg, will be the one to replace José Manuel Barroso as next European Commission President, and that's not to the taste of the UK Prime Minister.
Well, I think it's important on this issue to stand up and speak for what you believe in. I believe that the European Commission President should be chosen by the elected heads of government and heads of state on the European Council. That is the right approach, and it is wrong to sign up to this power grab by the parties of Europe and the European Parliament.
A power grab by the European Parliament. Sajjad Karim, the European Parliament is elected. Why is it a problem for the European Parliament to put forth the name?
Well, the issue is this, that it's important that we go back to what it says in the treaties, and it makes it very clear that the responsibility for the appointment or naming the candidate for appointment remains with the heads of state in council, taking into account the European Parliament's election results and after a period of consultation amongst themselves. But what is most intriguing and interesting now is that it's not just the British Prime Minister that is making this point. This evening, the most influential newspaper in Europe, the European Voice newspaper, has come out to say that, in fact, Mr. Schulz's own power grab in the European Parliament presidential election is an exercise of deceit. So we've got to go back to what it says in the treaties and work on from there. The European Parliament, this was billed, Matthias Fekl, as a change this time around, where the Parliament would be the one to give the nod of who would be the next leader of the European Commission. Yet it's still touch and go at this late stage.
Yes, but it's a question of democracy. There has been a campaign in Europe saying the winner of the European elections will be the president of the European Commission. And all the big parties in France and everywhere else in Europe have made a campaign on that issue. And it's obvious that the Conservative Party and Mr. Juncker won this election. And so the result of all of this is that he will become the president. It's a very important...
But can you understand how for ordinary citizens it looks like a case of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours? Sajjad Karim mentioning how Martin Schulz is going to be the next chair of the European Parliament, even though his voting bloc doesn't have the most seats.
This is another issue, but first on Juncker.
It's another issue, yes, or the same one?
No, it's another issue. It's the first time in the history of the European Union that the President of the Commission is not chosen behind closed doors by the heads of state or the heads of government, but by the European people, by their vote. And so it is
actually, this is not another issue
it's a
at
sort
all.
of revolution in the history of the European Union. It's a very important moment.
Sajjad Karim.
Well, this is not another issue at all, because, in fact, it is President Schulz, well, he's not the president at the moment, but he has made it conditional that Mr. Juncker will only get appointment through the European Parliament and socialist support if he is made the president of the European Parliament. He is the one who is linking these two things together. And that is the basis upon which the two largest groups have now come together and are completely ignoring the fact that the European elections have taken place. Is it any wonder today that European citizens are feeling the way that they are being excluded from these processes?
Edouard, go ahead, Matthias Fekl.
One thing, but what would European people say when we would answer to the request of Great Britain to change the president, when for months and months everybody said the one who will win the election will be the president of the Commission? This would be the worst thing to do, and European people would not understand it.
Edouard Tétrault, how will this be?
Let
me just bring in Edouard. Let me bring in Edouard Tétrault on this. How will this play out in public opinion?
Well, you know, first things first. There is, I think, our British friends, and it's not a Labour or Tory party, have played their hand rather badly. They have used a lot of convincing arguments and others that were less convincing. If only the word Spitzencandidate. A Spitzencandidate, when you say it in English, it's like the candidate that you spit, that you really reject, do not want. It was not phrased as the leading candidate from the European Parliament. I fully agree with Matthias. This was a fair proposal. These guys have campaigned in the various countries of Europe, notably in France, Germany, and we now have this. Top candidate emerging from the parliament. Now,
but doesn't it look a little bit like collusion when at the end of the day, after they've campaigned against one another, it's like, all right, you can have the presidency of the Commission, I'll have the presidency of the Parliament, even though, again, the Social Democrats are not the leading vote-getters in the European Parliament.
Well, you can see it in two directions. Either you say collusion or you say coalition. And I'm very interested in what is happening right now in Europe, which is that left and right-wing parties try to form something looking possibly like a grand coalition to run Europe, take it further. We've had a candidate by default, Mr. Barroso. We've seen what the EU Commission has not delivered over such a long mandate. Now it's time to move forward. I think it is also time for British friends not to concede defeat, that's not the story, but to move forward and to see how we can get the British back in the game where we need them. We do need, for the European project to move ahead, we do need Britain first united. There is a referendum coming up vis-à-vis the independence of Scotland, and that worries me a lot about the UK. We need a united kingdom. We need a united kingdom part of the EU for their interest and also our interest. What would be the European project without notably the British military? What would be the European project without the culture of democracy that is indeed lacking? There is a democratic deficit. And, sorry, last but not least, some of the objections that Prime Minister Cameron made during the campaign are very valid in terms of the principle of subsidiarity. Not everything should and can be ruled from Brussels. We need to renationalize a number of decisions that make sense locally. We need the British on board. It is time for Britain and David Cameron to move on, and it is time for the EU Commission to give significant jobs to our British friends in the next Commission.
All right, reactions coming in from viewers. Katerina saying, there's too much drama around Cameron. I think he's doing his best. And I'll put this to you, Sajjad Karim, before we go to Antonio. Some people are saying that Cameron has not played his hand well in this instance, because it's okay to be against the majority candidate if you can bargain, parlay it into something else. But here, his leveraging seems to have shrunk to naught. He's not going to get anything out of this.
Well, actually, what we as Brits have done this time round is introduced a lot of transparency into this decision-making process. It was the case that forever and a day, the public just simply didn't have any information about what was happening and who the candidates were going to be and who the ultimate appointment was going to be until the decision had been made behind closed doors. And I actually welcome the fact that for the first time after many, many years, you are seeing European leaders actually having a real debate about who the next President of the Commission must be. What I do find rather distasteful, however, is how the Parliament, the European Parliament, is being held to ransom under an operation of blackmail to ensure that in order to deliver this candidate, a certain course of events has to happen in the European Parliament as well. This linkage is deeply unhealthy for European politics and it must be broken. That is in the hands and the power of MEPs. Now, if the MEPs from the largest two and possibly the ALDE group just simply file into line and blindly reject what European citizens have said to us at the electoral box just a matter of weeks ago and follow this diktat that's coming to them from certain national leaders in order to make the Parliament subservient to Council, then the people of Europe will lose out. It is the British people here, it is the British MEPs and the British Prime Minister who is actually speaking up for democracy in Europe today when the other leaders are still trying to do deals behind closed doors.
Antonio Di Bella, let me ask you on this point, how is it going to be perceived? The way that we went from this election back in May, when we have, beginning of July, a new commission president, a new commissioners, and a new parliament, how's it going to be perceived?
A betrayal. I mean, I agree with what Matthias said. If now we change after everybody voted with a Pullman with Juncker as a candidate, and then we say, okay, what a joke. You voted for that, but we're not change it. Okay, I understand the British position, the Cameron position, who says that Juncker is a status quo, an old man of the old Europe. That's true. But I will put in another perspective. We have a danger. Europe is burning. We have the populists, the right in France, Grillo in Italy, Farage in England. And we have to do something together. The coalition to save Europe. That's the most important point. We have to save Europe from populism. And this is not a melange behind closed door. It's a coalition openly made to save Europe. And this is the only alternative. What's the proposal of the British? Okay, do what we want. What else? And I think it's in our common interest to go on and to make a coalition like, I'm sorry to say, like we did in Italy, because Italy is burning maybe in a worse manner than Europe, and Renzi made a coalition right and left to try to save Italy today and Europe tomorrow. And
by the way, speaking of Italy, on July 1st, the rotating presidency of the European Union switches to the one nation in Europe where Social Democrats romped at the polls. Italy, whose charismatic new prime minister ran as a Europhile, well, up to a point.
Anyone who thinks that the democratic gap which has grown in Europe could be filled by appointing Juncker or anybody else as president of the Commission is living on Mars.
Living on Mars. One comment from a viewer coming in on Facebook. Cameron is wrong. The future of Europe lies in further integration, not isolation and internal conflicts. Sajad Karim, let me ask you on this point. Do you take the point made there by Antonio Di Bella about the need to look beyond partisan politics when there is the rise of people that are more than just Eurosceptic?
It is essential that we recognise what actually happened in these elections. It's quite clear. The people of Europe have sent us a very clear sign that things simply cannot carry on as they are. They want more transparency. They want more accountability. They want to feel that the European Parliament and the European Commission and Council is reflecting what they have demanded. The people that went and actually cast a vote for the extremist parties, I don't believe for a second that the majority of those people actually actually believe in the things that those parties and those politicians, the populists, were preaching about. They were actually sending a very clear signal to the rest of us that we are not listening to them and we are not reacting to what they are saying in an appropriate fashion. And yet again, I have to say with a considerable amount of despair that despite them having given us that warning shot, and you have to bear in mind that there was a huge number of people who have demonstrated to us their unhappiness from their complete silence, their deafening silence by not taking part in the electoral process. But despite that, yet again, the European leaders and the European Parliament leaders are about to go away and give them more of the same, the very things that they have rejected before.
But isn't Jean-Claude Juncker closer? Isn't Jean-Claude Juncker closer to your political family? After all, you know, he's centre-right, he's pro-business.
Exactly.
Well, on the appointment of Mr. Juncker, let me be absolutely clear about what my position is. And indeed, I am a candidate against Martin Schulz in the European Parliament's presidential elections. Ultimately, it is a matter for the national leaders to put forward their views. And I think Mr. Cameron has been absolutely right not to keep his views hidden in the background, festering away, only to come up at a later stage. It's better that they are out in the open now, in the clear today. Thereafter, if a decision is made by the Council that Mr. Juncker must be the candidate that is put to the Parliament, then so be it. The MEPs must then vote upon that. But it's only right that this particular process is taking place in a transparent fashion.
Edouard Trétreau.
Yes. No, I understand all the critics coming from our British friends, and a lot of them are legitimate. There is even not a democratic deficit, but a sort of democratic surplus with Europe, because not many voters came for the European Parliament. So we hear the critics, we need to address them. But come on, move on. Now is the time for our British friends to make propositions, concrete propositions. We know that it is the will of a majority of heads of state, not only center, right-wing, but also social democrats, to have Mr. Juncker, whatever his qualities, his limits, etc., as president of the European Union Commission. So
well,
I will continue on that. So let us. Yes, I'm sorry. Let us now put concrete propositions on the table. I do not like to see Britain fighting yesterday's battle. We need Britain on board on tomorrow's battles. And what are tomorrow's battles? What are tomorrow's battles for the European Union? We have quite a number of them.
All right,
we have quite a number of them.
We have Edouard,
one.
I'm gonna give you the floor when we come back. We have to take a very quick break. We'll pick up on this point of how you reform Europe and make it more democratic when we come back here in the France 24 debate.